The old oak door clicked shut with a sound too quiet for the weight of the moment. Liam stood in the cool, dim hallway of the house he had once believed was a home, the scent of lavender and lemon polish, a cruel mockery of domestic peace. He had come home early, a rare occurrence, hoping to surprise Alara with flowers for their anniversary, but the surprise had been his. From the top of the grand curving staircase, her voice, the voice he loved, the voice that had once been his sanctuary, drifted down, sharp and clear, laced with a casual cruelty that felt like shards of glass in his lungs. She was on a video call, her laughter bright and brittle. "Honestly, Mother, you should have seen the look on his face when I told him the restaurant was too expensive," Alara said, and a chorus of chuckles answered her. Liam could picture them perfectly. His mother-in-law, Eleanor, with her perfectly coiffed silver hair and judgmental gaze. His father-in-law, Richard, smug and self-satisfied behind his mahogany desk. And her brother, Julian, a pale, sneering echo of his father. "He just gets this wounded puppy look. It's pathetic, really. 5 years of my life, wasted on a charity project." Richard's baritone cut in, dripping with condescension. "We told you, darling, bloodlines will out. The man has no ambition. He's content to doodle in his little notebooks and call it a career. It's an embarrassment." The words, charity project, pathetic, embarrassment, struck Liam with physical force. He leaned a hand against the wall to steady himself, the bouquet of white roses slipping from his other hand and scattering across the polished floorboards. He had thought their teasing was just that, the harmless jabs of a family that didn't understand his quiet passion. He was an architect, a good one, but 2 years ago he had stepped back from his high-pressure firm to take what he told them was a long sabbatical. He'd framed it as a desire to work on something more meaningful, a pro bono design for a community arts center in a low-income neighborhood. They had seen it as failure, a retreat from the world of success they worshipped. They didn't know the truth. They didn't know that the high-pressure firm wasn't just a place he worked. It was a company he had built from the ground up, a silent empire of glass and steel that he owned outright. They saw the humble clothes he wore to the building site, not the balance sheets that could buy and sell their entire world 10 times over. And in that moment, listening to their laughter, Liam realized they never would. His humility had been mistaken for weakness, his patience for defeat. And his wife was leading the chorus. The realization didn't just break his heart, it vaporized it, leaving a cold, hard vacuum in its place. A vacuum that was quickly filling with something else, something cold and clear and resolute. The humiliation would end, the laughter would stop, and they would be the ones to stop it. We've all felt underestimated at some point, haven't we? Pushed aside or judged on appearances. If you know that feeling, hit that like button and let me know in the comments where you're watching from. You're not going to want to miss how this story ends. Liam bent down, his movements slow and deliberate, and gathered the fallen roses. He didn't discard them. He carried them into the kitchen, found a vase, and filled it with water. He arranged the flowers with the same meticulous care he applied to a blueprint, his mind a silent storm of calculation. The conversation upstairs continued, a soundtrack to his life's great betrayal. They were discussing a man named Alistair, the son of one of Richard's banking partners. A suitable match for Alara, they agreed, someone with a future. Liam placed the vase in the center of the kitchen table, a perfect, pristine beacon in the gathering dusk. He looked at it for a long moment, then turned and walked back to the front door, his footsteps making no sound. He slipped out as quietly as he had arrived, the click of the lock a final, definitive period on a chapter of his life. He hadn't been destroyed. He had been forged. The drive away from the house was a blur of streetlights smearing across his vision. Liam didn't know where he was going, only that he couldn't stay there. The car, a modest but reliable sedan he'd kept for years, felt like a stranger's. It was part of the costume he'd worn for Alara and her family. The humble architect, the man of simple tastes. His real car, a sleek, midnight blue Aston Martin, was stored in a private garage downtown, a secret indulgence they knew nothing about. Like so much of his life, it was hidden behind a carefully constructed facade. He found himself pulling into the deserted parking lot of his current project, the half-finished skeleton of the Northwood Community Arts Center. It rose against the bruised twilight sky, a framework of steel beams and concrete floors. To Richard and Eleanor, this was his folly, his pathetic contribution. To Liam, it was a promise. He got out of the car and walked the perimeter, the crunch of gravel under his shoes the only sound. He ran a hand over a cool steel I-beam, feeling the solid reality of it. This was real. The structures he designed, the spaces he created for people to live and work and dream in, that was his truth. The life he'd been living with Alara felt like a phantom limb, an ache for something that was never really there. He pulled a worn black moleskin notebook from the inside pocket of his jacket. It was his constant companion. To his family, it was a prop for his doodling. Inside, however, were not just sketches for the community center. Tucked into a flap in the back were documents they could never comprehend. The articles of incorporation for Aethelred Designs, the holding company that owned his architectural firm, the deed to the downtown penthouse he'd never shown Alara, the latest quarterly report detailing profits that would make Richard's eyes water. He had kept his success quiet for a reason. He'd wanted to be loved for who he was, not what he had. He wanted a partner who saw the value in his passion, not his portfolio. He had chosen Alara because he thought she was different. In their early days, she had seemed captivated by his mind, his creativity, his vision for a better world built with intention and beauty. She would trace the lines of his drawings with her fingertips, her eyes full of what he had mistaken for wonder. When had that changed? He sank onto a low concrete wall, the notebook resting in his lap. The change had been gradual, a slow erosion. It began after they were married, after she had fully introduced him into the gilded cage of her family. He remembered their first Christmas as a married couple. Richard and Eleanor had given him a garish, oversized sweater with a reindeer on it, a joke gift that wasn't really a joke. Julian had handed him a beginner's guide to investing, patting him on the shoulder and saying, "Maybe this will help you get on your feet, old man." Alara had laughed along with them, a little too brightly. She'd squeezed his hand later, whispering, "They're just teasing. They love you." But they didn't. They saw him as a project, a fixer-upper, a man to be molded into their image of success. When he refused to be molded, their teasing sharpened, acquiring a harder, more cynical edge. The decision to take his sabbatical had been the breaking point. He had just sold a minority stake in a software patent related to his firm's proprietary design software for a sum that was, frankly, staggering. He was financially secure for generations. He wanted to step back, to reconnect with the reason he became an architect in the first place, to build things that mattered. He tried to explain this to Alara. "I want to do something for its own sake," he'd said, sitting across from her in their pristine living room. "Something that isn't about profit, but about people." She had smiled, a tight, strained expression. "Of course, darling, that's very noble of you." But he saw the flicker of panic in her eyes. To her, and to her family, stepping away from the relentless pursuit of money was a form of madness. His nobility was her social liability. From then on, the invitations to her family's events came with a new undercurrent of pity. They would seat him at the end of the table, asking him patronizing questions about his little charity project. Richard would pontificate about the real world of finance and commerce, gesturing vaguely in Liam's direction as an example of what happened when one lost touch with it. And Alara? Alara would sit there, silent. Her silence was not a neutral act. It was an endorsement. Every time she failed to defend him, she cast her vote. Every time she laughed at their jokes, she hammered another nail into the coffin of their marriage. He had absorbed it all, believing his patience was a virtue, that his love could eventually bridge the gap between their worlds. He had been wrong. Patience without self-respect was just a slow form of suicide. A text message buzzed on his phone, lighting up the screen. It was Alara. "Where are you?" "Getting worried." Another one followed a minute later. "The flowers are beautiful. Thank you, honey. Call me." The hypocrisy was breathtaking. She was playing the part of the loving wife while actively planning his replacement. Liam stared at the message, the words blurring. He felt a sudden, surprising calm settle over him. The pain was still there, a deep, tectonic ache, but it was no longer chaotic. It had a focus. He knew what he had to do. It would not be a loud, angry confrontation. That was their style, not his. His response would be like his architecture, meticulously planned, built on an unshakable foundation, and designed to make a statement that was both devastating and beautiful. He typed a simple reply. "Got held up. We'll be home late. Don't wait up." He stood up, placing the notebook back in his jacket. The wind whistled through the steel skeleton of the building around him. It sounded like the future. The days that followed were a masterclass in quiet endurance. Liam moved through his life with a placid exterior that betrayed none of the seismic shifts happening within him. He returned home late that first night, finding Alara asleep, or pretending to be. The vase of white roses sat on the bedside table, a pristine, silent witness. He looked at her face on the pillow, the elegant lines he had once found so beautiful, and felt a profound and desolate emptiness. The love he had felt was gone, replaced by a clinical, detached observation. He was studying a stranger. At breakfast the next morning, she was effusively cheerful, a performance of wifely affection designed to paper over the cracks he now saw were chasms. "Did you have a good day at the site yesterday?" she asked, pouring him coffee. "You must be working so hard on that center." "It's coming along," he replied, his voice even. He met her eyes over the rim of his cup. He was searching for something, a flicker of guilt, a hint of remorse. He found nothing but a polished, reflective surface. "Well, don't forget, darling, Daddy's big dinner party is on Saturday. It's important. All his most influential partners will be there. You'll have to dust off your one good suit," she said with a little laugh, as if it were a shared joke. In the past, he would have smiled weakly, absorbing the sting of the insult. Today, he just nodded. "I remember," he said. "I'll be there." Her relief was palpable. His compliance was all that mattered. The dinner party. It was the perfect stage. He spent the next few days in a state of intense, hidden activity. By day, he was at the community center site, overseeing construction, his demeanor unchanged to the crew who knew him as their dedicated, hands-on boss. But in the evenings, he wasn't at home. He was in his downtown penthouse, a space Alara had never seen, which served as his real office. The penthouse was a testament to his actual life. Minimalist, impeccably designed, with floor-to-ceiling windows that looked out over the entire city. Here he met with Marcus Thorne, the public face and CEO of his architectural firm, Aethelred Designs. Marcus was everything Liam was not: gregarious, sharp-suited, and a master of corporate theater. He was a trusted friend from university who had agreed to play the role of the visionary leader while Liam remained the silent, creative force behind the scenes. It was a partnership that had made them both incredibly wealthy. "Are you sure about this, Liam?" Marcus asked, leaning back in a leather armchair, a tumbler of whiskey in his hand. "You've guarded your privacy like a dragon guards its gold for a decade. Once you do this, the curtain is up. For good." "I'm sure," Liam said, his voice quiet but firm. He was standing by the window, looking down at the glittering sprawl of the city. He could see the illuminated glass tower of Richard's investment bank from here. It looked small. "They've mistaken my privacy for shame, my quietness for failure. It's time they learn the difference." "The gala for the Sterling Tower is in 2 weeks," Marcus said, a slow grin spreading across his face as he understood. "The one your father-in-law is hosting. The timing is poetic." "The Sterling Tower," Liam said, a flicker of a smile touching his lips for the first time in days. Richard is so proud of that building. He thinks it's a monument to his success. He doesn't know, does he? Marcus laughed. He has no idea. He has no idea that Ethelred Designs was the lead architectural firm. He has no idea that the innovative new construction techniques he brags about to his partners were developed and patented by me. And he certainly has no idea that the building's primary owner, the one he's been trying to get a meeting with for 6 months, is his pathetic son-in-law. Marcus raised his glass. This is going to be better than theater. It's going to be Shakespearean. What's the plan for the dinner party on Saturday? That, Liam said, turning from the window, his expression hardening, is the dress rehearsal. I need one last definitive record of their contempt. I need to give them every opportunity to show me who they are. And I need Alara to see it, without excuse or interruption. He picked up his moleskin notebook from the granite countertop. He didn't need the documents inside for proof anymore. He needed them for ballast, a solid weight in his pocket to anchor him as he walked willingly into the storm. He was no longer just enduring the humiliation. He was curating it. The night of the dinner party arrived, cloaked in a fine, cold mist that clung to the manicured lawns of Richard and Eleanor's palatial estate. Liam drove, with Alara beside him in the passenger seat, a vision in emerald silk. She chattered nervously about the guests, about the importance of the evening, about the necessity of making a good impression. Just try to be sociable, darling, she'd said as he helped her with her coat. Talk about sports or something. Just don't mention the community center unless someone asks. It's a bit of a downer. Liam simply nodded, his hands steady on the steering wheel. He was wearing the one good suit she'd mentioned, a simple, well-made charcoal gray suit that was, in reality, a bespoke piece worth more than her entire outfit. But its label was discreet, its quality a quiet statement only an expert would recognize. To them, it would look merely adequate. That was the point. He felt the solid weight of the moleskin notebook in his inner jacket pocket. It was his anchor. They were greeted at the door by Eleanor, whose smile was a work of artful tension. Alara, you look stunning. And Liam, you came. The slight pause before his name, the faint surprise in her tone, was the opening salvo. The house was a shrine to ostentatious wealth. Gilded frames, heavy velvet curtains, and abstract art that was more about price than passion. Guests mingled, glasses of champagne in hand, their laughter echoing off the marble floors. Liam recognized some of them from the city's business pages. Titans of industry, banking scions, legal eagles. To them, he was an anonymous face, Ilara's unassuming husband. Richard clapped him on the back with a familiarity that was more ownership than affection. Liam, good to see you, son. Glad you could make it. Try not to look so overwhelmed. He gestured expansively at the room. This is what success looks like. Pay attention. You might learn something. Liam gave a thin, polite smile. It's quite a gathering, Richard. The evening unfolded as a series of carefully orchestrated humiliations. At the dinner table, a long, gleaming expanse of mahogany, he was seated at the far end, next to a sullen-looking cousin and away from the main currents of conversation. Julian, Alara's brother, held court near the center, loudly recounting a recent business triumph. We closed the deal on the Kensington property, Julian announced, his voice slick with self-congratulation. Dad was brilliant, pulled the financing together in less than a week. It's all about moving decisively. No room for hesitation in this world. He glanced down the table toward Liam. You can't just sit around and wait for things to happen. Right, Liam? How's that, building of yours coming along? Still pouring concrete? A few people chuckled. Liam saw Alara flinch, but she quickly masked it with a sip of wine. Her eyes darted towards him, a silent plea for him to just take it, to not make a scene. He met her gaze, his expression unreadable. He then turned his calm attention to Julian. Foundations are crucial, Julian, Liam said, his voice carrying easily in a momentary lull. If you don't get the foundation right, everything you build on top of it will eventually collapse, no matter how impressive it looks from the outside. The statement hung in the air, its double meaning lost on most, but Julian's smirk tightened. He sensed a rebuke but couldn't quite grasp its shape. Right. Deep. Anyway, as I was saying, later, as dessert was being served, a woman seated near Liam, the wife of a prominent surgeon, turned to him with a look of practiced sympathy. Ilara tells us you're an architect. That must be so creative. It has its moments, Liam said. Are you with a firm in the city? She asked. Before he could answer, Eleanor, who seemed to have radar for any conversation involving her son-in-law, chimed in from across the table. Oh, Liam is between things at the moment, she said, her voice dripping with pity. He's doing some charity work. It's very admirable, of course, but we're all hoping he finds his footing in the professional world again soon. Ilara deserves that. The surgeon's wife gave him a small, pitying smile and turned away, the conversation over. He had been neatly categorized and dismissed. Liam's fingers brushed against the notebook in his pocket. He cataloged the insult, filing it away with the others. Each one was another brick in the wall he was building between his past and his future. He looked at Ilara. She was staring down at her plate, her knuckles white as she gripped her dessert fork. She was ashamed, but he knew, with a certainty that chilled him to the bone, that she was ashamed of him, not of her family. The dinner party bled into its final hours as guests began to depart, leaving a core of family and close friends lingering over coffee and brandy. Liam had remained largely silent since the exchange about his career, a quiet observer on the periphery. This was the moment he had been waiting for. Richard, emboldened by the success of the evening and a significant amount of expensive brandy, steered Liam by the elbow toward his study, a room paneled in dark wood and smelling of leather and self-importance. Come on, son, let's have a chat, man to man. The condescension was thick enough to be a physical presence in the room. Ilara watched them go, her expression a mixture of anxiety and resignation. She made no move to intervene. Richard closed the heavy doors, shutting out the rest of the house. He gestured for Liam to sit in one of the stiff leather chairs opposite his enormous desk, a symbolic placement that put Liam in the position of a subordinate awaiting judgment. Richard remained standing, pacing before the unlit fireplace like a king surveying his domain. Liam, he began, sighing as if preparing for a difficult but necessary task. I'm going to be frank with you. This isn't working. He stopped pacing and leaned against the desk, crossing his arms. Look at you. Look at this life. My daughter, she's a thoroughbred. She was raised for excellence. She needs a partner who can run alongside her, not someone she has to drag behind. Liam said nothing. He simply sat there, his hands resting loosely on his knees, his gaze steady. His calmness seemed to unnerve Richard more than any argument would have. This sabbatical, this hobby of yours, Richard continued, his voice laced with disdain. It was a noble idea, I suppose, for a while, but it's time to get back to reality. The world is run by men who build things, yes, but they build portfolios, they build wealth. They don't play in the dirt with concrete and rebar for free. He paused, clearly expecting a response. When none came, he pushed on. I've seen the way people look at you, the way they look at her. They pity her. My daughter. Pitied. The word came out as a hiss. Liam's mind was a silent recorder, capturing every word, every nuance of contempt. He thought of the Sterling Tower, the gleaming monument to Richard's ego, the building whose foundational patents were filed under Liam's name. He thought of the call he'd made to Marcus just that afternoon, finalizing the press release that would go out in 2 weeks. The irony was so immense, so staggering, it was almost humorous. I'm worried about her, Richard said, softening his tone in a clumsy attempt at sincerity. And I'm worried about you. You're not a bad man, Liam. You're just lost. You're out of your depth. He walked around the desk and sat down, leaning forward conspiratorially. I can help you. I have connections. I could find you a place, a junior analyst position at the bank maybe, something to get you back on a real career path. It wouldn't be glamorous, but it would be a start. It would give you some dignity. A junior analyst. The offer was so absurd, so profoundly ignorant of his reality, that Liam almost laughed. A junior analyst at Richard's bank would be making less in a year than Liam's company paid in corporate taxes in a single quarter. The offer wasn't an act of kindness. It was an assertion of dominance, a final attempt to shrink him down to a manageable size, to fit him into a box labeled dependent. Liam finally spoke, his voice quiet but carrying the weight of his resolve. Thank you for the offer, Richard, he said, the picture of calm politeness. But I'm happy with the path I'm on. Richard's face hardened, his feigned concern evaporating. Don't be a fool. This isn't a request. This is me telling you how it's going to be. You either get your act together or you get out of my daughter's life. She deserves more than a failed idealist. As he spoke, Liam's eyes drifted to the mantelpiece above the fireplace. Propped there, in an elegant silver frame, was an artist's rendering of the Sterling Tower, and next to it, a thick, embossed invitation card. Richard Sterling cordially invites you to the grand opening gala of the Sterling Tower. He'd seen the building's plans 1,000 times, but seeing it here, in this room, displayed as Richard's ultimate triumph, cemented his course of action. He stood up. I appreciate your frankness, Richard, he said, his voice devoid of any emotion. You've given me a lot to think about. He walked to the door, his hand on the brass knob. He turned back to face his father-in-law, who was watching him with a smug, triumphant look, believing he had won. I'll see you at the gala, Liam said. Richard chuckled, a low, dismissive sound. Don't feel obligated. It's a black tie affair. Probably not your scene. Liam opened the door and walked out, not looking back. He had what he needed. The final insult had been logged. The stage for the final act was set. As Liam stepped out of the study, the remaining guests were saying their goodbyes. Eleanor was at the door, bestowing air kisses and promises to call. Julian was slumped in an armchair, scrolling through his phone, bored now that the spotlight was off him. Ilara rushed to Liam's side, her face a mask of anxiety. What did he want? What did he say? She whispered, her fingers gripping his arm. We just talked, Liam said, his voice neutral. He gently disengaged his arm from her grasp. It's late. We should go. Her eyes searched his face, but for the first time she found nothing to read. His expression was a placid lake, betraying none of the raging currents beneath. This new opacity in him, this calm impenetrability, seemed to frighten her more than any anger could have. The drive home was silent. The unspoken words filled the car, heavy and suffocating. When they arrived, Ilara followed him into the house, the tension stretching taut between them. Liam, talk to me, she pleaded as he loosened his tie. My father can be overbearing. Whatever he said, you can't take it personally. Can't I? He stopped and turned to face her, his gaze finally allowing a sliver of the coldness he felt to show through. He offered me a job as a junior analyst at his bank, Ilara. He said it would give me some dignity. He watched the color drain from her face. And you sat there all night listening to them, to your mother implying I'm a charity case, to your brother mocking my work, and you said nothing. What was I supposed to do? She cried, her voice rising. Start a fight in the middle of my father's dinner party? Humiliate my own family? Your family? The question was soft, but it landed like a physical blow. And what am I, Ilara? Am I not your family? Tears welled in her eyes, the familiar defense she used whenever she was cornered. That's not fair. You know it's not. They just don't understand you. No, Liam said, his voice hardening. You don't understand. You think their behavior is something to be managed, to be excused. You see their cruelty as a social inconvenience. You don't see that it's a reflection of their character. And by staying silent, you endorse it. You are complicit in it. He walked past her and headed up the stairs. The conversation was over. He had needed to hear her defense, to hear her frame her silence as a choice between him and them. She had made her choice long ago. He was just now acknowledging it. He thought he would be able to leave it at that, to simply wait for the gala. But they had one last humiliation in store for him. One final, gross miscalculation. 2 days later, while he was at the worksite, he received a text from Eleanor. "Liam, dear, Richard and I would like to treat you and Alara to lunch today. The country club, 1 o'clock. Please don't be late." It wasn't a request. It was a summons. He knew it was a trap, but he went anyway. He needed to see this through to its bitter end. He arrived to find Richard and Eleanor waiting for him at a table on the terrace, overlooking the pristine golf course. Alara was not there. "Liam, thank you for coming," Eleanor said, her smile not reaching her eyes. "Alara is having a spa day. We thought it would be best if we spoke with you privately." Liam sat down. "What is this about?" Richard slid a thick envelope across the table. It landed with a soft thud next to Liam's water glass. Liam looked at it, then back at Richard, his expression unreadable. "We love our daughter, Liam," Richard said, his voice taking on a tone of grave seriousness. "And her happiness is our primary concern. It has become clear to us that this marriage is untenable. You're from different worlds. There's no shame in that. It's just a fact. We want to make this transition as smooth as possible for everyone," Eleanor added, her voice smooth as silk. "We want to be fair. We want to be generous." Liam's eyes flickered down to the envelope. He knew with absolute certainty what was inside. It was their version of a golden parachute, a severance package for a failed son-in-law. "Open it," Richard urged. Liam slowly reached out, his fingers tracing the edge of the envelope. He didn't open it. He simply looked at them, a long, searching gaze that held a universe of things he left unsaid. He was giving them a final chance to see him, to really see the man sitting in front of them. They saw only what they wanted to see, a problem that could be solved with money. "This is a mistake," Liam said, his voice low. Richard chuckled. "Don't be proud, son. There's a certified check in there for $50,000. It's more than enough for a man like you to start over, somewhere else. A clean break. You sign the divorce papers, which our lawyer will have ready by the end of the week, and you walk away. Everyone is happy." $50,000. The number was so laughably small, so insulting, that it broke through Liam's icy control and sparked a flicker of dark amusement. $50,000 wouldn't even cover the cost of the custom-milled Japanese oak flooring in his penthouse. It was a tip, a pittance, a final grand gesture of their complete and utter blindness. He pushed the envelope back across the table. "I don't want your money." Richard's face flushed with anger. "Don't be a fool. This is the best offer you're going to get. You can try to fight this in court, but we will bury you. You have nothing. We have the best lawyers money can buy." "I'm sure you do," Liam said, standing up. He placed his napkin neatly on the table. He looked from Richard's furious face to Eleanor's cold, contemptuous one. The last vestiges of any feeling he had for this family, any connection through Alara, withered and died in that moment. "Thank you for lunch," he said, his voice utterly calm. "You've made everything perfectly clear." He turned and walked away, leaving them sputtering in his wake. He didn't look back. The path ahead was now clear, straight, and bathed in a cold, bright light. The rehearsal was over. It was time for the main performance. The 10 days leading up to the gala were a study in contrasts. Outwardly, Liam's life with Alara continued in a state of fragile, frigid normalcy. They moved around each other like ghosts in their own home, their conversations limited to brief, functional exchanges. She was hurt and confused by his emotional withdrawal, interpreting it as sullenness, a wounded pride she couldn't be bothered to soothe. She spoke incessantly of the gala, of the dress she would wear, the people she would see, the importance of the night for her father's legacy. She was completely oblivious, lost in her world of surfaces and appearances. "You will make an effort, won't you, Liam?" she asked one evening, holding up a shimmering silver gown against her body. "For me? Just for one night, can we not have all this tension? Can you just smile and be pleasant?" "I will be there," he said, his eyes on the architectural journal in his hands. "And I will behave exactly as I should." She took it as a concession. He meant it as a promise. Inwardly, Liam was a whirlwind of focused energy. His days were spent finalizing the last details of his plan with Marcus. They met not in the penthouse, but in the soaring, glass-walled boardroom of Aethelred Designs, a company whose name was synonymous with cutting-edge architecture, but whose ownership was a closely guarded secret. "The press packets are ready," Marcus reported, sliding a sleek black folder across the vast conference table. "Full biography, portfolio of major works, the patent filings, and the complete, verified ownership structure of Aethelred and its subsidiaries. They go live the second you walk on that stage." "And the donation?" Liam asked. "The paperwork is signed. The Century Philanthropy Fund has been established. Your initial endowment of $200 million will be the largest single private donation to arts and education in the city's history." The mayor's office is already preparing a statement. They're ecstatic, though they're still under strict NDA about the donor's identity until the announcement. Liam nodded, a sense of grim satisfaction settling over him. Richard's company, Sterling Bank, made a big show of donating $5 or $6 million a year to various charities. Liam's one-time gift would eclipse 2 decades of Richard's carefully publicized generosity. It wasn't just about the money, it was about the statement. It was a direct refutation of Richard's entire worldview. That worth was measured only by what one accumulated, not by what one gave away. "The stage manager for the gala has the revised speaker schedule," Marcus continued. "He thinks the surprise guest architect is a charming addition to the program. He has no idea." "Good," Liam said. He stood and walked to the window, which offered a panoramic view of the city. In the distance, the Sterling Tower rose, its new glass catching the afternoon sun. His building, a monument to his vision, about to become a monument to his vindication. He felt a pang of something he couldn't quite name. It wasn't joy. It was a heavy, solemn sense of necessity. He was about to detonate a bomb in the middle of his own life, and the fallout would be immense. But it was the only way to clear the debris of the lies he had been living under. On the evening of the gala, a strange calm descended upon him. He showered and dressed with methodical precision. He chose a classic black tuxedo, exquisitely tailored by hand in Savile Row. It was another one of his secrets, a suit of quiet armor. When he came downstairs, Alara was waiting in the hall. She looked breathtaking in her silver gown, her hair swept up, diamonds glittering at her throat and ears. For a fleeting second, he felt the ghost of the man who had loved her. She looked him up and down, her eyes widening slightly. "Wow, Liam, you look incredible." For the first time, she was seeing a hint of the man he really was, but she couldn't process it. She attributed it to the suit, the occasion. "See, you clean up nicely when you try." The casual insult was so ingrained in her, she didn't even notice she'd said it. The ghost vanished. "You look beautiful, Alara," he said, his voice polite, distant. They drove to the Sterling Tower in silence. As they pulled up to the grand entrance, valets rushing forward, photographers' flashes strobing in the darkness, the scale of the event became clear. This was the pinnacle of Richard's world. The red carpet was swarming with the city's elite. Richard and Eleanor were standing just inside the magnificent 3-story lobby, greeting their guests like royalty. The lobby was Liam's design, a soaring atrium of white marble and glass, with a stunning, suspended staircase that seemed to float in midair. It was a space designed to inspire awe. Richard saw them approach, his eyes scanning Liam's tuxedo with a flicker of surprise before settling into their usual smugness. "Ilara, magnificent! And Liam, you made it. Try to stay out of the waiter's way, eh?" he said with a wink to a nearby guest, who chuckled appreciatively. It was the last time Richard Sterling would ever speak to him that way. Liam gave a small, enigmatic smile. "I wouldn't miss it for the world, Richard." He let Ilara go ahead with her parents, allowing them to sweep her into their circle of influence. He lingered by the entrance, watching them. They were in their element, preening, accepting congratulations, the masters of their universe. Julian clapped his father on the back, pointing up at the soaring ceiling. "You really did it, Dad. You put your stamp on the city." Liam felt a hand on his shoulder. It was Marcus, looking sharp and powerful in his own tuxedo. "Showtime," Marcus said quietly, his eyes glittering with anticipation. "Are you ready?" Liam took a deep breath. He looked at Ilara, laughing at something one of her father's partners said, completely unaware that her world was about to be turned inside out. He looked at Richard, basking in the glow of a triumph he thought was his. He thought of the laughter he'd heard from the top of the stairs, the offer of $50,000, the years of 1,000 small cuts. "Yes," Liam said, his voice as solid as the foundation of the building they were standing in. "I'm ready." The grand ballroom of the Sterling Tower was filled to capacity, a glittering sea of black tie and couture. The air hummed with the self-important chatter of the city's most powerful people. Liam stood near the back, a solitary figure nursing a glass of water, watching the scene unfold. Ilara and her family were at the head table, front and center, radiating smug satisfaction. Richard was in his glory, accepting a steady stream of acolytes who came to pay their respects. Several times, Ilara's eyes scanned the room, searching for Liam. When she finally spotted him, standing alone by a marble column, she gave a small, exasperated sigh, a look that said, "Why can't you just fit in?" He met her gaze and gave a slight, almost imperceptible nod, then turned his attention to the stage. The city's mayor finished his sycophantic speech, praising Richard Sterling's vision and contribution to the urban landscape. Richard preened, soaking in the applause. Then, the master of ceremonies, a well-known local news anchor, returned to the podium. "Thank you, Mayor," the MC said, his voice smooth and practiced. "And thank you, Richard, for being such a driving force in our community. The Sterling Tower is truly a landmark, a testament to bold vision. But as we all know, a great building is more than just an investment. It is a work of art, a piece of engineering poetry. And tonight we are honored to have a surprise guest, the visionary who brought this poetry to life." A ripple of confusion went through the room. Richard and his family exchanged puzzled glances. They had approved the speaker list. There was no surprise guest. "The lead architect of a great building is often an unsung hero," the MC continued, his voice building with dramatic flair. "A name known to industry insiders, but not always to the public. The firm behind the Sterling Tower, Ethelred Designs, is famously private. Its founder has always preferred to let the work speak for itself. But tonight he has graciously agreed to step into the spotlight." At the head table, Richard's smile had frozen. Ethelred Designs. He knew the name well. They were the most sought-after, most innovative, and most mysterious firm in the world. He had been boasting for months about how he had managed to secure them for his project, never having met the principal himself, dealing only with the CEO, Marcus Thorne. "Ladies and gentlemen," the MC boomed, his arm gesturing towards the side of the stage. "Please join me in giving a warm welcome to the founder, the owner, and the lead architect of Ethelred Designs, Mr. Liam Archer." For a moment, there was absolute silence. The name meant nothing to most of the people in the room. But at the head table, time seemed to stop. Four heads, Richard, Eleanor, Julian, and Alara, turned in unison, their movements slow and robotic, their eyes scanning the back of the room. Their gazes swept past Liam once, then snapped back, a wave of collective, sickening disbelief washing over their faces. Liam set his water glass down on a nearby tray. He straightened his tuxedo jacket and began to walk toward the stage. The journey felt both infinitely long and incredibly short. A spotlight found him, and a murmur spread through the crowd as they watched this quiet, unassuming man they had all ignored walk with calm, deliberate purpose toward the stage. He didn't look at the audience. He looked only at the four people at the head table. He saw Eleanor's hand fly to her mouth, her face a mask of horror. He saw Julian's jaw drop, his arrogant smirk replaced by slack-jawed incomprehension. He saw Richard's face, which had been flushed with triumph, turn a pale, sickly gray, his eyes wide with the dawning, catastrophic realization of his own hubris. And he saw Alara. Her face was a canvas of pure, unadulterated shock. The blood had drained from it, leaving her silver dress and diamond earrings to frame a portrait of utter devastation. Her world had not just been turned upside down, it had been revealed as a fiction she had co-authored. Liam ascended the small set of stairs to the stage, the applause now starting, hesitant at first, then growing as Marcus Thorne, who had been standing in the wings, stepped forward and shook his hand warmly for all to see. The MC handed Liam the microphone. The weight of it was solid, real. He stepped to the podium and looked out, not at the glittering crowd, but directly at his wife and her family. They were frozen, trapped in the spotlight of his ascendancy. "Good evening," he began, his voice calm and steady, amplified throughout the silent hall. "My father-in-law often tells me that you have to pay attention to learn something. I hope everyone is paying attention tonight." The air crackled with tension. Liam let the silence hang for a moment before he continued, his voice softening but losing none of its authority. "A building, like a person, has two parts, the facade and the foundation. The facade is what you see, the gleaming glass, the polished stone, the impressive height. It's what people admire. It's what they use to judge the building's worth." He paused, his eyes locking with Richard's. "But the foundation is unseen. It's the part that does the real work. It's buried in the dirt. It's not glamorous, but it holds everything up. Without a strong foundation, the most beautiful facade is nothing but a fragile shell, destined to collapse under the slightest pressure." He saw the words land. He saw Richard flinch as if struck. He saw Alara's eyes fill with tears, but these were not the tears of manipulative defense. They were the tears of genuine, soul-crushing regret. "For years," Liam continued, his voice a quiet indictment, "I have allowed people to judge me by a facade of my own making. I allowed them to believe I was a man of simple means and limited ambition. I did this because I believed that true worth, like a building's foundation, is not about what is seen, but about what is real. I believe that love, that respect, should be built on that truth, not on a glittering exterior." He let out a slow breath. "I have learned that some people are incapable of seeing beyond the facade. They only value the gleaming glass. They will mock the foundation. They will try to tear it down, not realizing they are standing on top of it." Then came the final, devastating move. "But the purpose of a strong foundation is not just to support itself, it's to support others. To that end, tonight I am pleased to announce the formation of the Century Philanthropy Fund. My company, Ethelred Designs, is seeding this fund with an inaugural donation of $200 million to support arts, architecture, and education for underprivileged youth throughout this city." A collective gasp swept through the ballroom. The sum was staggering, incomprehensible. The applause was deafening, thunderous. Liam didn't smile. He simply stood there, watching the family that had offered him $50,000 to disappear as they were erased by the sheer scale of his reality. He laid the microphone gently on the podium, His speech was over. His statement was made. He walked off the stage, past the stunned mayor, past the adoring press, and directly toward the head table, a place of honor that had just become a pillory. The four of them sat there, isolated in a bubble of silent, public humiliation, as the world celebrated the man they had tried so hard to diminish. Liam's walk from the stage to the head table was the longest 10 yards of his life. The thunderous applause was a distant roar, the astonished faces of the crowd a blur. His focus was narrowed to a single point, the four frozen figures who had once constituted his family. As he approached, the noise around them seemed to die away, creating an intimate pocket of silence in the cavernous room. He didn't stop to speak. There was nothing left to say. He simply walked past their table, his pace unhurried. He allowed his gaze to sweep over them one last time. Eleanor looked as though she had aged a decade, her carefully constructed mask of social superiority shattered, revealing the frightened, insecure woman beneath. Julian was staring at him, his mouth slightly agape, a look of childish, bewildered fury in his eyes. The world had just revealed itself to be a place he did not understand, a place where his father's rules did not apply. Richard sat bolt upright, his hands clenched into white-knuckled fists on the table. His face was a mottled patchwork of red and white, a man drowning in a sea of his own irrelevance. He had built his identity on the foundations of wealth and influence, and in a single 5-minute speech, his son-in-law had revealed himself to be a titan in a way Richard could never be. Richard was rich. Liam was powerful. And in that room, everyone now knew the difference. Finally, Liam's eyes met Alara's. Her tears were now flowing freely, tracing silent paths through her perfect makeup. Her expression was one of absolute desolation. It was the look of a person who has just realized they have thrown away a winning lottery ticket because they didn't like the color of the paper. In her eyes, he saw the full, crushing weight of her mistake. She had chosen the facade over the foundation, and the facade had just crumbled into dust. Liam held her gaze for a single, protracted heartbeat. He gave her a small, sad nod. It was not a nod of forgiveness, it was a nod of finality, an acknowledgement of the end. Then he turned and continued walking, heading for the grand exit without a backward glance. The life he had lived with them was over. The aftermath was immediate and chaotic. As Liam left the ballroom, he was mobbed by reporters, by business leaders, by city officials, all clamoring for a word, a handshake. Marcus appeared at his side, a formidable gatekeeper, expertly steering him through the throng and into a private elevator. "Well," Marcus said as the doors slid shut, a wide grin on his face, "I'd say that went according to plan." Liam leaned his head back against the cool steel wall of the elevator, the adrenaline finally beginning to recede, leaving a profound exhaustion in its wake. "It's done," he said, more to himself than to Marcus. Meanwhile, back in the ballroom, the Sterling family was imploding. The moment Liam was gone, the spell of their paralysis broke. Richard slammed his fist on the table, rattling the fine china. "This is a trick, a lie," he hissed to no one in particular, his voice cracking. But the lie was his own. The city's most powerful people were already looking at him differently, their expressions a mixture of pity and contempt. He was no longer Richard Sterling, the titan of finance. He was the fool who had tried to offer a pittance to a philanthropic giant. Eleanor grabbed her husband's arm, her voice a panicked whisper. "Richard, stop it! Everyone is looking." Ilara just sat there, numb. Her phone began to buzz incessantly on the table. Texts and missed calls from friends, from acquaintances, all asking the same question. Is it true? She couldn't bring herself to look at it. She felt 100 pairs of eyes on her, not with admiration, but with a kind of morbid curiosity. She was no longer the envied princess of the Sterling dynasty. She was the woman who had been publicly revealed as blind, disloyal, and profoundly foolish. She finally stumbled to her feet and fled the ballroom, her silver dress seeming to mock her as she ran. Not toward the exit, but toward the ladies' lounge, the only place she could hide. She locked herself in a stall, her body racked with sobs of shame and regret. Every cruel word she had spoken, every time she had stayed silent, every laugh at his expense, played back in her mind in excruciating detail. She hadn't just misjudged him, she had betrayed him. And she had done it for the approval of people who were now, in one single, stunning reversal, utterly irrelevant. Liam didn't go home. He went to his penthouse, the silent, orderly sanctuary that was his true home. He spent the next 2 days in quiet solitude, ignoring the storm raging outside. His phone lit up with hundreds of calls and messages. He ignored them all, except for the ones from Marcus updating him on the fallout. The story was on the front page of every newspaper and the lead on every news channel. The architect phantom reveals himself in billion-dollar gesture. The narrative was irresistible. The humble, underestimated genius, the arrogant family, the dramatic reversal. The sterling name, once a symbol of establishment power, was now a punchline, a cautionary tale about hubris. Richard's partners at the bank were in damage control. Clients were spooked. An empire built on the perception of shrewd judgment looked ridiculous when its leader had made such a colossal error in judging his own son-in-law. Julian, whose career was entirely dependent on his father's influence, found himself ostracized at the office, the target of whispers and thinly veiled jokes. Eleanor's social circle evaporated overnight. The friends who had once clamored for her invitations now crossed the street to avoid her. And then there were the calls from Alara, dozens of them. Voicemails filled with desperate, tearful apologies, with pleas for him to just talk to her. "I love you, Liam," one message said, her voice choked with sobs. "I was a fool. I was blind. Please, just give me a chance to make it right." He listened to the message, his expression unchanged. The words, "I love you," now sounded hollow, meaningless. She hadn't loved him when she thought he was a charity case. She loved the idea of him now, the power, the prestige. She was in love with the facade she had once despised. Finally, on the third day, he agreed to see her. He didn't summon her to the penthouse. That was his world, and she was no longer a part of it. He agreed to meet her at the house, their house. He arrived to find it dark and silent. She was sitting in the living room, in the dark, looking small and lost amidst the expensive furniture that now seemed so trivial. She stood up as he entered, her face pale and tear-streaked. "Liam." He didn't respond. He walked over to the coffee table and placed a large manila envelope on it. It landed with a soft, definitive thud. "I was wrong," she began, her voice trembling. "Everything you said, everything you must have been thinking, it was all true. I was weak and I was cruel, and I was so stupid. I let them poison me. But I can change, Liam. We can fix this. I can prove to you that I love you. The real you." Liam looked at her, and for the first time he felt a flicker of pity. Not love, not anger, just a sad, clinical pity for her brokenness. "The time for that is over, Alara," he said, his voice quiet, devoid of malice. "This isn't about the money or the success. You still don't understand that, do you?" He picked up the envelope. "This is about what happened in this house, in your parents' house. It's about the 1,000 little choices you made, the choice to laugh at their jokes, the choice to stay silent when they insulted me, the choice to value their opinion over your husband's dignity. You didn't defend me, Alara, not once. A marriage without loyalty, without that fundamental respect, is just a contract, and our contract is broken." He slid the documents out of the envelope and laid them on the table. Divorce papers, already signed by him. "Your father offered me $50,000 to sign these," he said, his voice dropping to an almost whisper. "He thought he could buy my absence. But integrity can't be bought, Alara, and it can't be sold. It can only be thrown away, and you threw yours away every time you chose them over me. She stared at the papers, then back at him, a new wave of comprehension and despair washing over her. This wasn't a negotiation. It was a verdict. "I'm not doing this to punish you," he said, his voice softening slightly. "I'm doing this to free myself, and maybe in time, to free you too. You need to figure out who you are without your father's money or your mother's social standing. You need to build your own foundation." He turned and walked to the door, leaving her alone with the papers and the ruins of the life she had chosen. The click of the lock as he left was the final sound, an echo of the quiet click that had started it all, just a few weeks and a lifetime ago. 6 months passed. The city moved on, as cities do, but the landscape of its elite had been permanently altered. The Sterling name was now synonymous with disgrace. Richard had been quietly forced into early retirement from his own bank, his partners deciding his tarnished reputation was a liability they could no longer afford. He and Eleanor sold their palatial home and moved to a smaller, more secluded property, effectively entering a self-imposed exile. Their power, which had been built entirely on perception, had vanished when the perception changed. Julian, stripped of his father's protection, was let go from the bank and struggled to find work, his arrogance no longer backed by the currency of influence. Ilara had disappeared from the public eye. Liam heard through mutual acquaintances that she had moved out of the city, that she was living alone, and that she had refused any financial support from her parents. She had taken a simple job in a small art gallery, a quiet life far from the world she had once craved. Liam hoped she was, as he'd advised, trying to build her own foundation. He felt no malice toward her, only a distant, sad peace. Their story was over. Liam, on the other hand, was more visible than ever, but on his own terms. He had embraced his role as the head of Aethelred Designs, finding that he enjoyed the public-facing aspects of the job far more than he'd expected. He was celebrated not just for his genius, but for his integrity. His story had become a kind of modern fable about the nature of true worth. He gave lectures, sat on boards, and used his influence to champion young, unknown artists and architects, the kinds of people his former family would have dismissed. His life was full, but it was also simpler. He sold the large house he had shared with Alara, its sterile perfection holding too many ghosts. He lived in his penthouse, a space that felt like a true reflection of him. Clean, functional, beautiful, and with a clear view of the world. He poured his energy into his work and into the philanthropic fund, which was already changing lives, building new community centers, and funding scholarships for students who had passion but no resources. One crisp autumn afternoon, he was standing on a windy hill overlooking the city. Beside him was the head of the city's parks department, and spread out on a portable table between them were the blueprints for his next major project, a breathtaking public park and botanical garden, to be built on a tract of derelict industrial land he had bought and donated to the city. It was a legacy project, something that would last for centuries. "It's beautiful, Mr. Archer," the parks commissioner said, her voice filled with genuine awe. "Truly, it will change this entire side of the city." Liam looked at the plans, then out at the sprawling metropolis below. He could see the Sterling Tower, still gleaming in the sun, a part of his past that was now just another building in the skyline. He no longer felt the sting of betrayal when he looked at it, only a sense of a difficult journey completed. The pain had been real, the humiliation profound, but it had forced him to shed a skin he had outgrown, to step out from behind the facade and claim his own life, his own truth. He had learned that true strength wasn't about hiding your power, but about choosing how and when to use it. It wasn't about revenge, but about realignment, about setting things right, not just for yourself, but for the principles you believe in. The greatest victory was not in their downfall, but in his own quiet, unshakable peace. "Let's get to work," he said, a genuine smile touching his lips. The wind picked up, carrying the scent of rain and new beginnings. "What do you think is the most important quality in a partner? Is it loyalty, ambition, or something else entirely? Let me know your thoughts in the comments below. Your perspective makes this community what it is. And if you found this story of vindication and integrity satisfying, please give it a like and subscribe for more tales of justice and redemption. Thank you for being here, and we'll see you in the next one.